Hi, this is Rebecca. I'm going to be read about my comic book strip. I'm going to be talking about the developmental learning, most specifically Pinier's theory of cognitive development and Vygotsky's theory on sociocultural learning. Hi, Bill. Hi, Sally. Have you ever heard of the theory of cognitive development? No, I haven't. Could you tell me? No, I haven't, Bill. Could you tell me a little about it? So far, Bill is wanting to tell Sally all about cognitive development, and comes to find out Sally already knows some stuff. So during this comic book strip, they kind of go back and forth, sharing their knowledge, realizing that, hey, they know a lot about it. So Pinier in 1936 said children were smart and said his work was genetic epistemology. So it was the origin of thinking, is what he said. The origins, genetic, and the thinking comes from epistemology. Oh, I've heard of that before. Pinier said we all have schemas. They are like memory clips of objects in our brain. I like that you know this information too, Sally. When you see a new object you go through a stage of assimilation. So if you see a new object and your brain thinks about what it could possibly be, and it goes through memories of things that are similar to it, and it assimilates ideas of what it could possibly be. Then, like trying to compare the new object to an old object already in your brain, is what Sally says. And if our brains can't find the new object, we match it to an object we already know. This is called accommodation. So if we take a good guess, or once we find out that, oh, hey, that's a chair, just like what I'm remembering what a chair looks like, and now our brain associates both of them as chairs. It accommodates. Did you also know that equilibration is the driving force for development? Yes. And that's exactly what it is. It's the driving force for development. There's really, that's the simplest, easiest explanation for it. Development for learning. Pinier also wrote about the 4 stages of development. Do you know what they are? And Bill says, yes, I do. And he's so eager, he wants to tell Sally all about them. They are the sensory motor stage. That's from when you're born till you're about 2 years old. You go through the sensory motor stage where you're crawling around on the ground, you're walking, and you're touching things, you're smelling things, everything's new, and this is how you're learning. And Sally gives him a good old, awesome, you do know it. And then he goes on to say that you have the pre-operational stage from age 2 to 7. And then Sally chimes in and says, oh, and the concrete operational stage of age 7 to 11. And then Bill's like, yeah, you got it right. And the last one is the formal operational stage, age 11 to adulthood. Next, Pinier also said that children learn best through actively exploring. Do you know what that's called, Sally? It's called discovery learning. And anybody who knows kids, they're always discovering things, and that's what Pinier figured out, that kids are smart in their own way. They're not like adults yet. They have to go through stages. They have to go through stages to learn, and then they become adults and their brains mature. And that's what he's talking about with they go through the sensory motor stage, the pre-operational stage, the concrete operational stage. They go through all these different stages, and that's how they learn. And Pinier did a lot of different studies. He did a study on liquids, where if you had 2 glasses of water that were exactly the same, he put them in front of kids, 2 glasses of water filled up the same exact amount, and then he brought in another glass that was taller, and put the same exact liquid inside the taller one, which made it look like it was more liquid. And he realized that some kids actually could tell that it was the same exact amount, and some kids couldn't. And this made him want to do more studies and dig in deeper, because he realized kids were really smart. Because at one time people thought that kids were thought just like adults, but just weren't smart yet. And through his studies, through Pinier's studies, we found out that they are really smart at a young age. They think differently, and they have to mature in order to become adults. So next it says, "Hey Bill, have you ever heard of the zone of proximal development?" And Bill says, "Hey Sally, I think I have." This is when they start getting into Vygotsky's theory on social cultural learning. The zone of proximal development. Bill says, does it mean in between of what you know now and what you have the ability to know? And Sally's like, yes. And with this, I also heard of scaffolding. And they kind of go hand in hand. Zone of proximal development explains what it is, and then scaffolding is a method of teaching when there is a zone of proximal development, meaning you know the person knows it, but they need help getting to it. You know they have the potential of knowing it, and they're right there. So you use scaffolding to help them learn. And with scaffolding, you use the person, the more knowledgeable other person. And in this next scene, they kind of make a joke about one of them being the more knowledgeable other person, and they're actually learning. They're learning from each other. So they kind of chuckle about being the more knowledgeable other person. In the next one, it says, "Hey Bill, did you know that the most effective scaffolding is when you shift strategies often?" So he did a test. Vygotsky did a test saying, or through his different testing, he had mothers teaching through the scaffolding method, and they found that children were learning very, very quickly through scaffolding. And so going back to my comic book strip, he says, yes, that is a very effective way for people to learn. And then he says, I sure do like learning like this. Do you? And Sally said, yes, me too. Children do as well. They learn through knowledge through social interactions. If you put kids in a social situation, they become empathetic. They learn very quickly. And through the studies that Vygotsky did in his theory, he found that children do learn in social interactions. So meshing kids that are smarter with the kids that may need some more help, putting them together, they learn from each other. Reciprocal teaching is a method used so eventually the teacher is no longer involved. So the method is where the teacher will sit down and teach steps in how to read, how to gather information from a passage, and eventually the teacher does this over and over again with the student, and after she does this, or he or she does this after a while, she no longer has to, the student will know just to sit down, do this method, and he or she won't have to be as involved. reciprocal teaching. And Sally says, "Yep," and the student is teaching themselves in a sense. Zone of proximal development also pushes collaborative learning. Have you heard of it? And collaborative learning is almost like knowledge through social interactions. It's where you take a group of kids, you put them together, and according to the passage that I was reading, this is a current interest with a lot of theorists, a lot of psychologists, a lot of educational department people. That yes, Sally, groups come together and grow together, so we learn from each other. Thanks for, and then so I ended it by them just kind of saying bye to each other. And that's my comic book strip.